So Ecclesiastes 10 stands alone because it sounds like the book of Proverbs. It's just a few quips that are going through. And he's gone through, remember last week he was talking about death is certain, but life is unpredictable. And then he's going to give us this chapter of kind of some working out of that, just to give us a little proverbial sense. When you read the book of Proverbs, it's sayings that are typical, but not always. All right? If you kick a sleeping dog, it will bite you. Maybe, maybe not. It's just not a wise thing to do. All right? I wanted you to check the awokenness of your neighbor, because really that's the cure of the problem of this chapter. The problem of this chapter is folly. All right? Folly is a forgetfulness, a sense that we are in this time, that I am connected, supposed to be engaged. In fact, that this time is very much a battle. Folly is a disruption of acknowledging the seriousness of life. Folly can ruin a life in an instant. In an instant. And we'll talk about that. My dad was a Golden Gloves boxer. My wife, she hates contact sports. I love contact sports. I did a lot of that when I was a kid. I remember this one time when I was in my 20s, I was doing some martial arts, and we were in the ring, and it was my turn to fight. All right? And I was fighting an older guy, probably my age, honestly. And I outranked him, and it shouldn't have been that difficult of a thing. But the problem was I have this respect thing growing up in the military. You just respect gray hair, okay? So I found myself, and also his son, who was my age, was there watching. And I was like, I can't hit a dad in front of his son. So I was on defense. I was just playing my game, trying not to get hit. But the goal is to hit someone in the face as much and as hard as you can, right? And so I'm in there just playing and thinking, I just need to not offend this guy. And then all of a sudden, he kicked me where he shouldn't have kicked me, and it was wake-up time. All right? And honestly, that's what most of us need in our spirituality. We need the right kick, the right hit. Sometimes it comes through pain to remind us this is not a game. That we are involved in an ongoing onslaught of humanity by the evil one, and that our job as believers is to stay engaged, to be empowered by him, to awaken and fight. And fight. Because folly, the lack of being on point, a moment of folly can destroy a life well lived. You've had these friends, and I've had these friends. A moment of folly and virginity is gone, never to be replaced. A moment of folly, and there may be a child on the way. A moment of angry folly, and you find yourself in a criminal offense. A moment of spending folly, and you find yourself broke, poorly invested. A moment of moral folly, and you destroy your family, your 30 years of marriage, everything. Folly seems like a simple word. It seems like, oh, they're just having a little fun. But folly leads to destruction. And that's what chapter 10 is going to show us. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. It's just this little bug. But the way they would do perfume back then, it was more like an ointment. Okay, not something that you spray out of Fragonard, but it was more like a salve that you would put on. But a dead fly would ruin it because it was such a small amount, and that dead carcass would set it off. So is a little folly outweighs wisdom. You can live a good life for 60 years and make a bad choice. Dealing with parents, college kids, a lot of my ministry back in the States, you're always on the edge because that college party could lead to this decision from peer pressure. And though the kid is a good kid, He finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, making the wrong decision for the wrong reasons, and everything that he grew up trusting in, believing, living by faith in, as a parent, that kills me. But it's not just kids, it's us as well. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. It doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed here. What he's saying is that there's a trajectory that if you choose poorly, you can go off into the moral weeds. You can go off into an area that will dislocate you from everything you believe. And we don't get it. We always have to be on point. Billy Graham started getting really popular, and so they started trying to catch him in immoral things, to try to get a picture of him doing something wrong. Billy Graham had a guy that was his personal assistant, and he was the only guy when Billy Graham traveled. This personal assistant was the only guy that knew where Billy Graham was sleeping that night. He would always book 2 places, and he would never tell anyone, not even Billy, where he was staying that night. Because they were so trying to get him, they would put women in his room to get a picture that when he opened up the door, it showed him in an immoral look. But he took it seriously. And he had a guy that kept him out of trouble. And that may seem like a little far-fetched, but we need to be serious. Because folly is everywhere. We see it here, really on the street, okay? That a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense. And he says to everyone that he is a fool. Imagine a drunk person walking down the road. You see him coming. He thinks he's having fun. But you recognize right away, that's foolishness. That's foolishness. And you go the other side, or you avoid him at some length. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. So you're in a business meeting, your boss goes off on you, it's not right, he's got it all wrong, and he just lets you have it. Or your kids are in French classroom, the teacher screams at them, and the next response of you in that business meeting or your child in that classroom determines everything. Because if you get up, slam down things, walk out, hit the door, things change. If your kid stands up, defends, yells back, they're about to be in trouble, maybe. That folly takes on our emotional and lets it roll. My first ministry experience was with this group called Athletes in Action. And they took us for a whole summer and they trained us playing volleyball, okay? And it was mixed teams, guys and girls, and they would put in referees that would make bad calls on purpose, all right? The coaches would choose to take out your best player at the most critical moment. I mean, game point, and he puts in all the scrubs. And it was intentional for weeks on end because they were training us, you do not lose your emotion, because what's going to happen is after you go through this training, we're throwing you out into the city leagues, and you're going to have bad calls and bad decisions, and you need to keep your cool because you're wearing a big cross on your uniform saying you're here to represent athletes for Christ. And so we would play these softball tournaments or whatever, and while they would be yelling at us and cajoling us and, trying to make us make mistakes, when they hit the ball well, we would say, hey, great hit. When they did a good play, oh, that was a good play. They didn't hear negativity coming out of us. And after every game, with the exception of one team, out of 6 weeks of playing, every team gathered with us after the game and heard a gospel presentation because they wanted to know. Because about baseball, softball, for those not American, it goes about 9 innings, okay? And about inning 3, so after they bat and we bat, they just got quiet because they couldn't understand why we would be encouraging them to do their best. And they quit making fun of our team, and at the end of the game, they wanted to know, what is different about you guys? And so we would tell them. When the ruler rises up, it's going to happen. You got to keep your cool. Folly will take you down. There is an evil that I've seen under the sun. Here he is. Remember, he's giving us this under the sun, this vapor perspective, this humanity, this passing temporalness. There's an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were, an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I've seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. Folly has no class distinction. We can find it everywhere. Folly somehow makes its way to the top. I mean, honestly, if I were to ask you to list the 10 best world leaders right now, who would they be? I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to knock them down. But every time in my country, when they put 2 people up for president, at least for the last half dozen elections, so 20 years, I'm like, is this the best 2 people we got? And folly finds its way to high places. And so you cannot expect to live in a world that isn't impacted by it. And yet, you are expected to live in Christ to not let it impact you. The world is going this way. I mean, honestly, the laws that are getting passed, parents that are losing their kids for not allowing a 6-year-old to determine their gender. I'm not even sure I knew my left and right. Okay? And I'm not picking on that. I'm just saying we have examples of really high folly right now. You keep going. He who digs a pit. So folly is on the street. Folly is at the workplace or in high places the last time, and folly is at work. He who digs a pit, so someone who digs for a living will fall into it. This is a little bit tricky because if you talk about pit digging in the book of Psalms, it's always kind of you're doing it to set a trap for someone who's righteous, and you end up falling into it yourself. So it could have that kind of spear here. Or a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. But I think what's going on is these things happen even though you're trying to do good. He who quarries stones is hurt by them. He who splits logs is endangered by them. That there is an essence of folly that is just embedded in this world. If the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. You can see this guy. I grew up a little bit in Tennessee where there was snow, not so much in Texas, but in Tennessee there was. And you would go out to cut wood, and it's just bitter cold, and you just want to get the wood and get back in. And your axe might not be ground recently, so it's dull, and you're just like, I'm just going to hammer this log in parts, and it just shatters it. But if you take just a little bit of time, sharpen the blade, you could get in and out of that weather a lot faster. Wisdom helps one to succeed. There is a place for wisdom. Inspiration versus perspiration. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. I've actually been in this situation. I was walking the streets in Delhi, and this guy had these 2 king cobras in baskets sitting about this far apart, and both of their heads were just doing this number, right? And he had a seat right here. Okay, call me a fool, but I'm not that foolish. Because he said, hey, come sit. I'm like, there ain't no way I'm sitting there. He goes, no, I'll take a picture for souvenir for you. I'm like, no, bro, I ain't getting anywhere near. Where I grew up, there's 4 snakes that can kill you if they bite you. And I know those 2 look pretty deadly. And He said, no, it'll be a good souvenir. I said, no. He goes, no, you don't understand. They have no teeth. And I said, it don't matter. I said, if the snake bites me, something dies today. Either me or it. You know? But you can see this guy out there doing it on the street. And if it did bite somebody first, he's not going to make any money that day because he didn't charm it. All right? Folly follows us everywhere. Folly can be in our words as well in verse 12. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. And actually, my mouth can do both things. And when I'm walking with the Lord, when I'm putting him first, I can be pretty wise because I'm echoing what I've been studying, what I know to be true. But when I'm just aloof, and you can get me there, man, get me on something all of a sudden that everyone's getting passionate and opinionated on, and I'll have an opinion as big as them, and I've got the least knowledge on the subject. Honestly. And it's just foolishness coming out. And if you're not careful, that foolishness will consume you. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what it is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? Okay, so this is getting a little bit different. This is getting more on the line of a fool says that there is no God. Oh, we all just go to nothingness after this. Oh, we all get to go to heaven after this. And a fool speaks. And he misleads. And his words are not good. A fool speaks as if they know what will follow, but what comes out of his heart, or what comes out of his mouth is what's in his heart. He doesn't know. And the toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. He doesn't know the way home. And yet it's here for us to gain. And this is why Solomon is writing this book, is for us to know that life under the sun is a certain way, but there's a way above in which we can connect to. And it's through Christ Jesus. That the way of the fool is to say, I don't need any help. The way of the fool is, I don't need this instruction. The way of the fool is, I'll make up what is going to happen after this. One of my kids is trying to get evangelistic back in Texas with some kids that, just don't believe. And they use the classic illustration. Well, these people believe this, these people believe this, these people believe this. Don't you think they're all going to get there? The illustration of the 3 blind men and the elephant. I've used this before. One guy grabs the leg, he thinks it's a trunk. One guy grabs the tail and thinks it's just a rope. One guy grabs the trunk and he thinks it's a serpent. And they use that as an illustration to say, and, everybody has their own interpretation. But the end of that story should go like this. Yeah, you got 3 blind men looking at an elephant and calling it something else, but there's a guy who can see, a guy who predicted his death, a guy who rose from the dead, a guy who sees things as they really are. And he says it's not a trunk, it's not a rope, it's not a snake, it's an elephant. And you know what? He's right. And they're all wrong. And he's saying, come to me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. If you do not have the Son, you do not have whatever image you have as the Father. As Christians, if we do not have Jesus, we are not Christian. Other groups that do not have Jesus are not believers. And he pokes his head up a little bit here. I'm behind, aren't I? Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. He's not lost his mind here. He's just giving you that glimpse that, you know what? There's things out there that you can enjoy. Folly isn't one of them. But eat and laugh. Have a glass of wine and celebrate. Money, use it to overcome some of the destructive processes in this life. He's not saying these are your cures. He's not turning materialistic here. He's just saying that there's a little reward for diligence in this life. But be careful, because even in the midst of that, even in your thoughts, do not curse your ruler, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature will tell the matter. And you know how this works. You speak in confidence, and that confidence, not maliciously maybe your friend just shares it in a prayer request or shares it unknowing that it was really something important. And it circles around to someone to when they hear that, it's hurtful or harmful, and they have power and they can do something about it. New Testament says that we are to take captive every thought, that we are held accountable for every word. And yet we just flagrantly talk about anything with all this expertise. And yet Proverbs says, he who is silent is seen as wise. Sometimes just shutting your mouth will make you the wisest person in the room. All right, some applications. Awake. Are you awake? Are you engaged? Are you taking life seriously? Maureen, I don't know. I wasn't planning on saying that, but I think the article you sent me yesterday, I read a few, but I think it was on the one that I think less than 1% of our life is spent in worship. If you just do the math of time in church versus time sleeping, time working, whatever. And honestly, it's so wrong. This, yes, should be worship. But you need to bring worship into the rest of your life. That's what being awake is. Awake is being cognizant of God when you're working, when you're recreating, when you're talking, when you're doing whatever. So when do I get some time off? You don't. You really don't. There is not a time once you come under His kingdom that you can pull back and say, hey, I'm not going to be Christian today. I do similarly in my Americanism sometimes. I try to fit in here in St. Paul. I try to, speak as poorly as I do, as much French as I can, and to do the right things, and to, the bisous and everything that's required of me culturally. But there are days when I'm done. I'm done with being in France. I'm done with being European. I am an American Texan at heart. I put on my ball cap, my shorts, and I just go be me. I don't care if they think I'm a tourist. I really just don't care. But I'm done being European today. But I don't have that same advantage with Christ. He has bought me. He has purchased me. My passport in Texas, as tight as you might think as I hold on to it, it's a loose fit. We are going somewhere else. Are you awake? Because it's an acronym, awake. Are you awake? The W is war, because we are at war. You are another W, witness. Either a good one or a bad one. How you live your life at any given moment is your witness to others on how you represent the kingdom, the king. You forget your helmet over in the Donbass region and missiles come, it's not only inexcusable, it's probably deadly. Okay? And we need to have that same mentality. Go to Ephesians 6 and read that this week if you want to, but we need to be girded up for battle every day, because the enemy, he lies waiting for that day when you put down your guard. He's patient. and he will attack. Awake, you're at war. The opposite, I think, is awe. And we talked a lot. This has been in a lot of, if you've met with me this week, this has been in my conversations because I think we're missing it. I think a lot of what we do at church undermines awe, and we need to bring back awe. We need to come in here in a reverent manner. We need to come and think through why we are here. What is our purpose? Why do I study this word? Why do we sing these songs? Why do we worship at all? Not every week, but some weeks, I'll come in here when I'm up here studying in the middle of the week, and I'll lay prostrate on the floor, and I will just pray right here to remember, yeah, I get it. It's a commercial center. There's nothing real sacred here. Though I do like the new paint and the new bricks. Thanks, Maria, Steve. But it's sacred because of what we do together here. And we walk in sometimes not acknowledging that, and we need to bring awe back in. How do we get awe? Knowledge. I know that sounds so clinical, but you get it from getting in your word. You get it from discussing that word with other believers. You get it from praying that word to the Lord and hearing back from him through it. You get it. Faith comes through, Romans 10, hearing the word. It's inextricable. If you're not spending time in your Bible, awe, it's not coming. You can go see awe in creation. You can go see awe at the beach. You can see awe in another person. But you've got to connect it, anchor it in to substantial evidence, which is his word. If it's 5 minutes, take it. If that's all you got to give in the morning, take it. If it's one paragraph that you can read, read it. In fact, I encourage most people to read less and go deeper. Because a lot of times we read our 5 chapters to get through the Bible in a year, and we get through the 5 chapters, but we don't get to our heart. We need to be awake. We need to remember we're at war. We need to bring awe back in. That is through knowledge, and we need to then take all that and engage. Because you can be knowledgeable, you can have a self-awareness of God's presence, you can know you're at war, and you can even be in it, but you can remove yourself from it. I tell Jen every now and then, I said, let's just go live off the grid. 10 acres, middle of Texas, we'll drill a well, we'll bring in some, whatever, but we're just going to block off everything else because this world is getting crazy. But you can't. But we do that in little ways. We stay in our cubicle. We don't reach out to our colleague. We don't go offer cupcakes to the neighbors. We don't invite people different from us in for dinner. We don't express our faith in verbal, practical ways. We got everything working for us, but we don't engage. And that's what we're here for. Why I'm here for. Why I continue to try to persevere with the work just piling on is because I know that if you know this, if that you can put this in an engaged way, that I can empower you to go forth. The Ephesians 4 that we're getting in the newsletter the last couple weeks, that you can be doing the work of the ministry which you're called to do. And that in so doing, you will grow in conformity to be more like Jesus Christ. And in so doing that, you will realize your purpose on this earth and you will be fully awake. I guarantee. We need to be awake because we're at war. We need to bring awe back into our life that comes through knowing Him and engaging in what He's called us to do.